Knicks Heat. There's a lot to unpack in this series. I think the context of this series to start, I just want to point out, right?
Yeah.
Because we could talk about different, we were talking zone, the way that he played zone last night, all that stuff. The Knicks were without Julius Randle for game 1.
Yeah.
The Heat were without Jimmy Butler for game 2. For me, it's the big picture stuff. I don't have the big picture stuff because I haven't seen the full picture.
Right.
I see the stuff on the margins,
Yeah.
And in some ways, I think this series is very hard to predict or even analyze right now. Like, I can analyze and say, RJ Barrett, since his first 2 games when he stunk against Cleveland, he was great the last 5 games, right? I could analyze. He's getting to the basket. He's getting to the free throw line. He's scoring in the paint. 5 threes last night. You can't always predict on his shooting, but it's like the big picture stuff. When I think about the teams at full strength, I don't know yet.
No, you don't know. None of us know. It's going in. I thought this literally it was a coin flip type of series, meaning whole lot of 1 possession games with 6 minutes to go. And at that point, who steps up on a given night, who makes shots, who avoids foul trouble, somebody getting hurt, whatever, somebody having a rare hot night that you didn't expect. This is as close as I think it's going 7 games because I just think that's going to be the nature, right? Somebody's going to be down 3-2 and they're going to play with such desperation. They're going to get that to a 7th game. And then you get back to the Garden. That's where I see it going. But you're right. These are incomplete pictures because these aren't just other guys. These are like the guys. Like they're both them. Brunson, I guess maybe you could say is the guy, but Randle, equally important, and particularly because the Heat have not really had an answer for him all year. Kind of bullies them a little bit. So let's see. Hopefully we see that in game 3, what that looks like with both of those guys out there at the same time.
I think Randle looked physically, he looked good last night. We don't know what Jimmy's going to look like. And I think an interesting thing to point out with that potential matchup is, Jimmy guarded Giannis a lot when Giannis was available for the Bucks. And if Jimmy is at all hobbled and Julius is feeling good on that ankle, that could be a tough matchup for the Heat to figure out. I think ultimately we will see more and more zone. I don't know that we ever see a full game of it. From any team in the NBA.
Right.
But Spo is so good at first of all, they run a great zone. He's so good at mixing it up. I remember calling a game last year in I think it was the playoffs, second round against 76ers. I called 2 Heat games last year. I called a Suns game as well, but I think it was the 76ers game in the playoffs. And there was in live action, not off a free throw. In live action, Miami scored. There was 38 to 42 seconds on the clock. And as soon as they scored, he called out the zone so that Philly couldn't get the quick 2-for-1. And it's like shit like that where I'm just, obviously he's got years and years of experience, but that to me, just on the fly, being able to communicate that, being able to recognize that, then his team reacting to it. It's just good stuff. And that's what I think makes this series so interesting because I thought Tibbs did a great job of adjustments in that Cleveland series. So game to game, you're right. I think it feels like a 7-game series.
Spo is amazing. One of his greatest qualities, and I got to spend some time with him a few summers in a row down in Miami and just, in a casual setting and just talking hoops like we do in the green room. I'm just like, man, like you can't be more impressed how sharp this guy is. One of the things I love about him the most, and I preach this all the time to coaches that I've worked with or even my own team when I coached them, he values guys for what they do well. Okay. That explains how you find all these guys that maybe other teams didn't have quite the interest in. And they have such an impact on really good teams because he looks at it like, I'm going to value you for what you do well. And it is my job as a head coach to protect you from your weaknesses. I am not going to hone in on, let's just take a guy, for example, let's take a Duncan Robinson or Max Strus. He doesn't really create much off the ball screen. I don't really trust him handling the basketball. And then the first time he dribbles the ball off his foot, when he gets pressure, you're looking for somebody else to replace him. Like that's bad coaching. His thing is, no, this is what you do well. We need that. I'm going to value that. The things you don't do well, it's my job to protect you from not being in those situations. And I think he does that better than any coach in the league. And so therefore he maximizes confidence of his entire roster. And obviously he's smart. He's a great tactician and all those things. Question for you, because we couldn't play zone when I was in the league, right? That was later. I don't know how much you guys played it on any team. What team were you on that played it the most? Or would you say any team played it even enough for that to register on your radar? And did you practice it ever?
I had teams that played it here and there. I had teams that we would work on it. We would spend literally hours in a given 2-week period
and never call it out
and work on it. And then we'd do it for like 2 possessions, Well,
that's my point. Yeah.
But they do practice.
I know.
And that's what makes it so unique. Dallas is the other one with Rick. They've employed zone a number of times. Remember when JJ Barea would play in the playoffs, they'd have him show a bunch, but they played zone a lot. Even in that title run, they played zone. I remember, early in my career, I had to be in the rotation during February because we had a bunch of injuries with the Magic. This was my rookie year. And Brian Hill was like, all right, we're going to play zone. And I remember this game in New Jersey where I was playing pretty well on the offensive end. And it was like, all right, we're going to keep JJ in. And we played it for almost the entire second half and they just fucking torched us. and that's what makes the Heat zone unique.
Right.
Because there are so many holes and there's so many ways to exploit a zone, especially when you have shooting and especially when you have guys who can make plays out of that little short roll area or off the baseline. If you have a big or even a Jimmy Butler who can make plays out of that area, it's really, really hard to play zone for an extended period of time. I think it's hard in the NBA to do it well.
That's why I asked you that question because, I'm sitting here watching since the zone was instituted and I've watched all these games and broken them down. Rarely do I see a team go to zone and it looks remotely effective. It's terrible usually because they don't practice it much. They kind of do it on the fly in a given moment because something's killing them. Well, let's call zone out of this timeout. And guys come out there and they're not into it. First of all, there's a million mistakes because you shouldn't be able to play an effective zone against NBA players. They're just too good, right? And you could put the ball in the middle of the short baseline, which can be uncomfortable for some people. It's a weird place. That's where you attack a zone in the NBA. If it gets there, you're dead. There's so much shooting on the floor. But Miami does it.
You overload a side and you set a ball screen.
That's it.
And you head towards the side.
Very few teams.
You got some tough decisions to make.
And the Knicks finally did some of these things in the second half. They weren't doing the first half. They were kind of a little bit befuddled by it. They got a high ball screen on the top guy for Brunson. He came off, knocked down a 3. One time I loved it. Randall caught the ball on the left wing and just backed that wing all the way into the paint with 4 dribbles to the point where he's about to shoot a little turnaround jumper. And finally, the opposite wing came running into the lane and he just threw a 1 pass directly to Josh Hart for a 3. But that was Randall collapsing the zone, right? Josh Hart one time drove baseline, turned the corner, 3 guys flood to that area, collapsed the zone. He then kicked it out, 1 more pass, wide open 3. They didn't do a lot of that in the first half. And my point to all of it is you shouldn't be able to be effective, yet the Heat are because they practice it and it's become part of what they do on a nightly basis. Never, I don't think, to the extent that they did it in game 2. So we'll see what happens going forward.
Last night was the Heat's worst defensive rebounding game of the playoffs so far. Obviously, it's been a strength of the Knicks this whole run. Is there any impact with zone and defensive rebounding?
Definitely, of course, because you don't have a specific target to block out. There's always gaps and seams for guys to get running starts. Very difficult to box out in a zone. And I remember the Lakers played a good amount of zone in the bubble, and they had a massive back line. Right? They had just incredible size on the back line. They could go fingertip to fingertip, almost touch sideline to sideline. It's different. Very few teams play that kind of size. So it's hard because the ball goes up, you turn, you don't have a specific assignment. So it creates opportunities. I thought one of the biggest keys to the game too was Hartenstein. What he gave them, and particularly that one trip when he got 3 offensive rebounds and it ended up in a 3 and they were down 3 at the time. Stuff like that, you really hurt them. Robinson was in foul trouble a lot, but between the two of them, you still got 14 boards out of your center spot. And that probably number would have been closer to 20 if Mitchell Robinson doesn't get in foul trouble.
On the rebounding thing, and this is I'm going to get to Mitchell Robinson on this because I think it's a compliment to him. There are guys who rebound, like Domantas Sabonis rebounds the basketball, and he does a good job of pursuit on the offensive glass. I know he struggled. Against Looney. Looney's literally relentless on the offensive glass, but he's primarily defensively. He's a box out guy, right?
Yep.
Kevin Love's another. Kevin Love is great at box out.
A grounded rebound.
Yeah,
right.
and there's value in that.
Sure.
I played with a guy in Dwight Howard. I'll never forget it. My rookie year, BJ Armstrong, who was one of my reps at Wasserman, came to Orlando to check on me. I wasn't playing. We went to dinner afterwards, and we were talking about Dwight, and he's like, yeah, Dwight is able to rebound and grab basketballs outside of his personal space.
Right.
And that's what makes him. I don't know how many times I saw Dwight box out in the 6 years that I played with him.
Right.
4? I literally,
Yeah.
I mean, it's single digits. He just had a great sense of where the ball was going to go, and he could rebound outside of his personal space. And I think Mitchell Robinson does that really well.
Yeah, it does.
And it's hard to box out a player like that.
Yeah, because you never really have them fully in check. Even when you think you do, they still have that ability to take one more step or extend another foot and come up with the bat. It's the most frustrating thing in the world. I would hate to have to deal. The guy that did a lot of that in my era was Rodman. Like the relentlessness with which he went, and the ones he could run down that nobody else could. Yeah, and then the stamina he had, particularly when you know what we probably did last night, before the game, and the guys out there outrunning everybody in the court. It didn't make any sense. But Mitchell Robinson is one of those guys that the value to that man, and Looney, how much he's increased his value in this league in the last couple of years, because it's now expected that you're expecting now. Because it used to be like almost like, oh, Loon, you get a layup or, get a tip in and everybody reacts to it. Now it's like, oh, no, this dude is going to get us, bad night, 15 boards.
He does this.
Yeah, this is who he is.
Yeah.
And he's also become a very good passer, which is really important in what they're doing too, especially if you're not going to be a non-scorer. So his value is exponentially increased.
Both him and Draymond, this is not like a jealousy thing. Because I played with guys that were really good. DeAndre Jordan was really good at this.
Yeah.
The best time to shoot a three-pointer is on an offensive rebound. And you watch Looney, if he's not underneath the basket, and sometimes even when he is underneath the basket, if he feels like he can't get a clean look, Draymond does it as well. Get offensive rebound. Where's Stephen Clay? Like they just find those guys so well. So Hero's going to be out. So the Miami Heat, when I say at full strength, I mean with a healthy Jimmy Butler.
Right.
With the Knicks, I mean with a healthy Jalen Brunson and with a Julius Randle. These two teams at full strength, either one of them. What are your sort of feelings about their ability to actually win the Eastern Conference and beat Philly or Boston in the next round?
Give either team fits and lose, ultimately.
Yeah.
That's how I'd view it. Whoever wins the Boston-Philly series is going to, I think, get to the NBA Finals. But 6 or 7 games wouldn't shock me one bit against either one of those two teams because of the way that they play.
The identity. Yeah.
That's it. And it's what you're talking about, not letting go of the rope. That typifies both teams. You're going to have to kill them to stop them. And so that just lends itself to being in close games. And then, that's when you got, on a given night, guy makes a shot, makes a play, you're right there. So I think they could go toe-to-toe, really scare them, but ultimately just not have enough to deal with Joel Embiid, Tatum, Brown, just not enough to be able to deal with all that offensive firepower.